Bet365's 2023 NFL season preview. There is a little bit of a chill in the air. The seasons are turning, and that means it is finally time for NFL football. I'm your host, Tori Petrie. I'm joined by Action Network's Chief Content Officer, Chad Millman.
Good to be here.
And Senior NFL Insider, Josina Anderson.
Great to be here.
Guys, we've got a lot to talk about today. Here's a little bit of a preview of what's to come.
So I don't know how you look at the AFC without mentioning the Jets. I mean, they have Aaron Rodgers. He's a Hall of Famer. He's going to elevate their offense.
I spent 7 years of my career in Detroit, and if that man could win a home playoff game in Detroit, they'd build a statue of him on Brush Street.
Yeah.
I would want to be at Lambeau when Jordan Love is stepping onto the field as a starter for the first time.
Not in December, though.
That's true.
I would disagree. It's even better. Listen, I grew up in Chicago.
Okay, guys, we will start with the most obvious question. Who's going to play in Super Bowl 58 and who's going to win it? Chad, you go first.
All right, look, 9 of the past 10 Super Bowl winners began the season with Super Bowl odds of 12-1 or less. So if we look at that category, we're talking about the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, the Eagles, and the Niners. I'm going with the Bills from the AFC, the Niners from the NFC. Think about the Niners first. They have a top 3 defensive line. They have the reigning defensive player of the year in Nick Bosa. Most importantly, they have a coach in Kyle Shanahan who, from a betting community perspective, is as respected as Andy Reid and Bill Belichick. What he does schematically, he's so creative. No matter what player is on the field, he seems to be having more fun trying to figure out how to coach that team than anybody else. I like their opportunity in an NFC that is not nearly as strong as the AFC. In the AFC, I like the Bills. Last year, before the season began, Josh Allen, everyone thinks, oh, he is the best quarterback in the NFL, better than Patrick Mahomes, right? He hurts his elbow. We realize sort of being without Brian Daboll is more of a hindrance than we expected. Now his elbow is healed. He's got another year with Ken Dorsey. The defensive line is much improved. I like the Bills to come out of a very competitive AFC, and I like the Bills to win the Super Bowl.
Okay, all right. Well, Bet365 likes the Bills and the Niners as well. They got the Niners plus 900. Bills are plus 850. Josina, who are your picks?
So I don't know how you look at the AFC without mentioning the Jets. I mean, they have Aaron Rodgers. He's a Hall of Famer. He's going to elevate their offense. And I was thinking about Thursday Night Football last year where Zach Wilson was the quarterback of the Jets and was going up against the Jaguars and looked like he didn't want to be there. And so just to have that much of an elevation at offense when they already have things kind of squared away on defense. And remember, at some point last year, that team was 6-3 heading into the bye. And that's when Breece Hall was like hitting it at all cylinders. And they lost him. And I think that was a big part of also why their offense fell apart. So now getting him back and Aaron Rodgers and Dalvin Cook and this and that and Alan Lazard, Mecole Hardman, how can you not think about the Jets in the AFC? So that's my AFC pick. Okay, moving to the NFC. I think so much of NFL is not just talent, strategy, and coaching, but it's also emotion. And when you think about the fact that the Eagles got so close in winning the Super Bowl last year against the Chiefs, losing 38-35. By the way, I was there. I saw how they were so dejected in the locker room after the game. And sometimes that's where I like to go to really kind of see how the character comes out after the, not just the guys who win, but the guys who lose. And I remember the looks on their faces. And I think having the opportunity to try to roll it back and come back, that's why a lot of those guys did come back this year, specifically for that opportunity, and Kelsey and the cornerback and everybody. So I feel like, even though Brock Purdy, was a major reason why the 49ers obviously didn't get, the way that they wanted to have it done in the NFC Championship, the Eagles having got that close is the reason why I feel like it's just that enough for them to actually do it.
All right, so they make it there. They actually do it this year.
I do think so. As long as Jalen Hurts stays healthy, obviously attrition is always a huge thing in the NFL. And the same thing for my AFC pick. So long as everyone is upright, I think that is possible for the Eagles in the NFC.
I'm with you. Yeah. I like the Eagles as well for the Super Bowl this year. I mean, Jalen Hurts with that photo on his phone, walking off the field after having lost. It's such that emotional connection to wanting to get back there. But in the AFC, I like the Bengals. I feel like they're a team that maybe their window is closing with those young guys on that roster, where this is their chance to get it done.
Yeah, look, you've got to win the Super Bowl in the first 4 to 5 years with a quarterback on that contract, because after that, You've got to pay him. You've got to pay other players. This is the time for the Bengals because those receivers are going to come up. Joe Burrow is going to come up. They're going to run out of money. So this is their opportunity.
All right, and the Jets are plus 1,400, so you're really ahead of the curve there. And the
But that
Bengals,
number's been moving, right?
That's
Like
true,
they are
that's
a
true.
very public team. A lot of people are jumping on that Jets bandwagon right now.
All
Don't
right.
put the dream team curse on them from the Eagles from years past, the Vince Young and all them, and they didn't do it, but hopefully they won't have that same type of karma.
All right, Eagles are plus 800. So we're talking about some favorites here. Let's talk about some surprise winners. What teams do you think might surprise and win their division this year, Chad?
All right, well, look, in 18 of the past 20 years, a team has gone from worst to first in their division. I'm going with the Cleveland Browns
Wow.
in one of the more difficult divisions
Yeah.
in football. But this team has a roster that is stacked. And I don't just mean talking about the offensive backfield. Their offensive line is a top 3 offensive line, could be top 2, maybe only behind the Eagles. Their defensive line is a top 3 defensive line. Myles Garrett is the most dominant defensive end in the NFL, and that has been when he has had no help on the other side of the line. This year, the Browns give him Zadarius Smith, who had 10 sacks with Minnesota last year. I love what this team can do if Deshaun Watson can return to form. I think he
Yep.
has a great coach. I think we saw a lot of the rust last year, and I think that is helping people downplay expectations for him. I expect him to bounce back. I expect this team to win their division.
Josina, who's your pick?
So I am going to go with the Washington Commanders. And I know people
Okay.
probably would think, why would she even say that? But that's why it is a surprise, because I think Sam
Exactly.
Howell may perform a lot better than people are thinking. Now, I was just at the joint practices in Baltimore between the Ravens and the Commanders, and it's not just because he's a fellow Tar Heel and I'm a fellow Tar Heel, but he actually has really good poise. And I was watching the game Monday night where they were playing against Baltimore, and he just stood in the pocket. His eyes looked square. He didn't look like he was being rushed, and he did go through his progressions and things like that. And he does have the connection with De'Ami Brown because they both came out of Carolina, and he does have the connection with Johan Dotson because they came in at the same time. And obviously, Scary Terry McLaurin is who he is, although he did get a turf toe in that game. So I feel like they have the potential. And then we haven't even talked about the defense. Remember, this is a defense that still finished 3rd in the NFL last year in terms of yards per game allowed without Chase Young. Now you're talking about Chase Young coming back from an ACL and adding to that with Deron Payne. He just got that major contract, and Allen and all those boys, and Tez and Sweat and what have you. So I really feel like if all those things come together and Sam Howell can just, really get over his skis and it can click in his head, they really have an opportunity, despite the fact that it's in the NFC East, to surprise some folks just because of how strong that defense, though I do believe that they are potentially thinking about starting at least 1 or 2 rookies at corner. But a lot of teams are actually, even the Giants. So it's not unforeseen. Even the Bills had to do that last year while they were waiting on Tre'Davious White. So.
Well, look, that NFC East also, every year there's a different team that wins the division title. So it's not a surprise to be able to say it could be the Commanders, because also a team has to go from worst to first. We know that's going to happen, and their defensive line is insanely good. So I don't mind that pick.
Yeah.
I like those picks, guys. Regardless, I think those are going to be some fun teams to watch in this 2023 season. Chad, you alluded to it earlier. The AFC is going to be a tough conference this year, but does it actually have the toughest division? Josina, who do you think is the toughest division in the NFL this year?
I've got to go with the AFC East because I'm thinking of the fact that 3 of the 4 teams are really, really, really strong. When you're talking about the Jets, you're talking about the Bills, you're talking about the Dolphins. Any of those teams can really step forward and have a very strong year. And the reason why I didn't go with the AFC North, even though I'm high on the Ravens and obviously high on the Bengals, which you also talked about, but because the Browns still have to kind of find themselves with Deshaun Watson coming off of last year, and I had an opportunity to cover that many times last year. You can tell that he's still trying to find his comfort level with everything that was not only just going on on the field and trying to get acclimated to a new team, but getting adjusted to obviously all of the headlines that he was dealing with off of it. So I think it's a really good opportunity for him to do that, especially with what you said, the expectations being down. But entering the season with everything being square, the AFC East at least have 3 teams that I can get behind. And I'm not poo-pooing the Patriots, but they're not up to the other level of the other 3, okay?
I think that's fair. Chad, who's your pick?
I love what Josina is saying about the AFC East. If you look at the strength of schedule challenges in the NFL, the hardest strength of schedule, the toughest schedule that any teams are going to face are in the AFC East. And that is because of how good every team in that division is. The second hardest schedule that teams are facing is in the AFC North. And to me, that is the hardest division in football right now. It is the only division where every team has a win total of 8.5 or higher. It has 2 coaches in Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, who are the most respected amongst bettors for their ability to coach teams up and have them cover and win as underdogs. It has fantasy lover quarterbacks in Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And we talked about the trenches, right? I love football because it starts in the trenches. In the Browns, you have one of the best offensive lines and one of the best defensive lines. In the Ravens, you have one of the best offensive lines. In the Steelers, you have one of the best defensive lines. Every team in this division is good.
I'm with you on this one, Chad. I think the Steelers and Ravens are going to make the Bengals' road to the Super Bowl. Even though they were my Super Bowl pick, I think they're going to make it really tough.
Yeah, it's a really good division. They can have a really good offensive line if Russell Wilson gives them a chance to be a good offensive line and doesn't hold the ball.
And they got so close, as I mentioned before. So I could see a team like this really getting 14 or 15 wins just because they're such a well-oiled machine and because they had so many returning players.
15 of the past 19 offensive rookie of the years were drafted top 12 or better.
Let's talk win totals. Bet365 sends a win total for every single team in the NFL. You bet the over if you think they're going to win more than that. You bet the under if you think that they're going to win less. Chad, whose win total do you really like for this season?
I am going to go with the Denver Broncos over 8.5 wins.
Okay.
A bit of a surprise pick because a lot of people think Russ Wilson is totally cooked and Sean Payton cannot do anything to make him better. But look, this team has a lot of talent on the edges at receiver. Javonte Williams is back at running back in the backfield. They can have a really good offensive line if Russell Wilson gives them a chance to be a good offensive line and doesn't hold the ball. But I'm thinking about this defense. Last season, this defense was beleaguered, but they only gave up more than 20 points once in the first 11 games. They had 11 games where they lost by 1 score or less. They lost 3 games in overtime. It became a running joke. Like if this team had averaged 18 points a game, they would have made the playoffs. So I think with a lot more coaching help from Sean Payton, this is a team that has a chance to improve considerably upon where they were last year.
I like that surprise pick. Josina, who do you think has a chance of getting into the double-digit win totals?
Well, I'm always looking at the teams that performed really well in the postseason the last year and who are just going to kind of approach this season more as, a tune-up and already having the experience to get back to where they were. So it's very hard not to pick a team like the Eagles. I just feel like they are gonna not necessarily cakewalk it through, but it's kind of like been there, done that. They're in their skins and they got so close, as I mentioned before. So I could see a team like this really getting 14 or 15 wins just because they're such a well-oiled machine and because they had so many returning players. I would feel similarly about the Chiefs. I would feel similarly about, the Bengals. There are a lot of teams that do have new, coordinators and a lot of new pieces. But the fact that their core part of their team is still together, and I just love the tapestry of the energy in the locker room. I think that they have the emotional endurance also to ride from the beginning of the season after Labor Day, week 1, all the way through the Super Bowl, just because I feel like they'll be that emotionally intent.
Bengals, Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers all have 11.5 win totals. So if they're in that 12 to 15 win range, they definitely they definitely cover the win totals there. Okay, let's talk about our favorite regular season awards. Who do we think is going to outperform and take home one of these NFL awards at the end of this season? Chad.
All right, so did you know Josina, did you know that 15 of the past 19 offensive rookie of the years were drafted top 12 or better? Garrett Wilson, your favorite team, the New York Jets, offensive rookie of the year, drafted number 10 last year, right? 11 of the past 19 have been drafted in the top 8. Number 8 pick this past draft, Bijan Robinson, now playing for the Atlanta Falcons. I love Bijan Robinson as offensive rookie of the year. He's going to a team with Arthur Smith that is going to rely on him, right? And we've all seen the nifty running he can do, not just at Texas, but in the preseason. He's also great out of the backfield. He's a supreme weapon for a quarterback who is going to be trying to feel his way in a full year as a starter in Desmond Ridder. And Arthur Smith, look, he has figured out a way to be creative as a coach with running backs when he was a coordinator and as a head coach. So I like Bijan Robinson, offensive rookie of the year. You look very skeptical when I'm saying that.
No, it's not that. I have very, high expectations for Bijan. Obviously, think he's very, very talented. But I'm going to go wide receiver with my pick. I'm going to go Zay Flowers with the Baltimore Ravens. And the reason for that is because I think that his foot agility speed is so elite. Now, I became convinced when I saw a video coming out of Florida where Lamar Jackson, Odell Beckham Jr., Elijah Moore were all practicing, and obviously Zay Flowers down in Florida. And his change of direction speed stood out in that video, even with those people. And I was like, wow, okay, because, I'm not a big, college football consumer. I always say, as someone who's covered the NFL for 20 years, I'll start paying attention to when you make the 53-man roster. I ain't got no time to be thinking about y'all right now. So when I think about it from that standpoint, and especially seeing him go up against the Commanders Monday Night Football, you saw how he dazzled. There was that one play where he rolled out and shifted out to the right side, came back in, and was able to weave his way into the end zone. So I think he has a big opportunity to be very, very elite. And I don't think that I've seen, outside of Tyreek Hill, for the Dolphins, someone really, especially as a former trackster myself, someone really hasn't surprised me with their foot agility speed since Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, we can say all this other stuff with regards to the headlines, but on the football field, when you're talking about coming off of a dime and moving faster than the naked eye can catch up with it, Zay Flowers is pretty close to that.
All right. You've talked a lot about the Eagles. I think my pick here is going to be Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'm going Jalen Carter. Darius Slay has talked about him in the media recently, talked about how he is really a game changer and can be a huge player for that team. What do we think of that pick?
I love it. Look, this was a classic Howie Roseman pick. Josina, you talked about Howie Roseman and the roster he's put together for the Eagles, right? He got a guy who a lot of people consider to be the top player in the draft, and he dropped for a variety of off-the-field reasons, but it was the most obvious pick to make. And what Howie Roseman has done with that defensive line, he slots in perfectly because he has people that he is comfortable with around him. I think he's poised to dominate for a defensive line that is probably the best defensive line in the NFL. I don't hate that pick.
All right. Well, Bet365 has players' future markets for just about everything. The most passing yards in the NFL, the most rushing yards, the most sacks, the most interceptions thrown. Let's just pick one of them here. What's one that you think is maybe a lock for this season?
All right. Well, I would say lock is strong language. But I would say most passing touchdowns. When I think about futures, I'm thinking about what are the numbers that are from 20-1 or longer, right? Because you're going to spend a little bit of money. It's going to be locked up for the full season. You want a little bit of value on that return. So I'm going with Trevor Lawrence at 22-1 to lead the league in passing touchdowns. And the truth is, I had Trevor Lawrence at 50-1 to lead the league in passing touchdowns last year. So I think I was a year early.
You were.
But look, he ended up with 25 touchdowns last year. 16 of them came in the latter half of the year. And in the latter half of the year, he had 4 multi-touchdown games. And in the first half, you could see he was figuring out Doug Peterson's offense. But he was lacking touch in the red zone. He was pretty inaccurate. He got much better and much more comfortable as the season went on. And then we saw it in that playoff game against the Chargers. And if you look at the Jaguars' schedule, 14 of their 17 games are being played in conditions that are favorable to a quarterback, meaning they're either in good weather outside or they're in a dome. So I like Trevor Lawrence 22-1 to lead the league in touchdown passes.
Josina, what about you?
I'm gonna go with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, how can you not
That's a
go
safe
with
one.
Patrick Mahomes? I mean, they're leading with passing yardage and all these other things. He's coached by Big Red. They have the offensive ingenuity as far as the creativity, and it doesn't matter who's in that offense, regardless of wide receiver. Tyreek Hill wasn't there; he left. He went to the Miami Dolphins. What did they do? Win the Super Bowl. They put in Juju. He gets the defining play in the Super Bowl last year. You know, he gets in the end zone. He can sling it to whomever. And the fact that he has Travis Kelce, who has such a huge catch radius and can just be his safety blanket wherever on the field. I know it's a easy pick, but I don't see how you don't go with Patrick Mahomes. So I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes.
Okay, I might go with someone else here.
Okay.
Justin Herbert
Okay.
for most passing yards in
Okay.
the NFL. Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. I think that there could be some potential there for him to maybe edge out Patrick Mahomes by a little bit.
Definitely huge arm, big talented arm, has the weapons there too. Sometimes they get a little forgotten out there in the AFC West because they're tucked so far out there in California right now. But total big pick as far as the ability as far as offense.
And if you look at Jalen Hurts, he improved when he got A.J. Brown. If you look at Josh Allen, he improved when he got Stephon Diggs.
When you look at his yards per carry last year before he got hurt, it was at 5.8. I mean, I think people forget just how potent he was.
If he gets Deshaun Watson to be just as excellent, this team wins the division, he's coach of the year.
Every year, there are guys who wow everybody and who have a breakout season. Last year, Trevor Lawrence, Cowboys running back Tony Pollard. Who do we think is going to be that breakout player this season, Chad?
Look, I'm going with Justin Fields. The hype is real. Everybody loves Justin Fields right now. His MVP odds have dropped to 22-1. And last year, the Bears did something really interesting. They were terrible early in the year trying to make Justin Fields a pocket passer, a drop back passer. They went into their bye week and they realized, wait, the Eagles are crushing it with Jalen Hurts, putting him in these RPOs and letting him use his ability to drop back and create offense on the edges. And they started doing that with Justin Fields. And all of a sudden, even though the Bears continued to be terrible, Justin Fields was a game breaker in every single game. And now all of a sudden we go into the next season and the Bears Super Bowl odds started 100-1. Now they're down to 50-1. What the Bears did was they got Justin Fields, DJ Moore in the trade with Carolina. And if you look at Jalen Hurts, he improved when he got A.J. Brown. If you look at Josh Allen, he improved when he got Stephon Diggs. You give a really talented quarterback a top-line receiver, and all of a sudden you're giving that player a lot more options to improve. I think Justin Fields can end up as one of the top fantasy quarterbacks this year, probably has a higher ceiling to me for fantasy than Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert. So I'm all in on Justin Fields.
How about you, Josina?
I'm going to go Breece Hall. And the reason why I'm saying that, not just because it's the Jets, but I mean, I really saw the impact that he did have on the offense when he was healthy. I mean, he was a huge reason why they started off the season 6-3. And when you look at his yards per carry last year before he got hurt, it was at 5.8. I mean, I think people forget just how potent he was when they gave the ball to him. And for that to be evident with a running back, especially with that type of offense, I just thought that he really stood out. He had 463 rush yards last year. And remember, he was able to get that type of potency starting in just 2 games, so he played in 7. And he had almost 500 yards. So I feel like he has a big opportunity. And not only that, but Coach Robert Saleh has been talking about just how great he's been looking in practice. You know, they wear those things that look like sports bras that measure their speed and all that other stuff. So they've been talking about the top end speed that he's been showing in practice, although he's still coming back from the ACL. So I think he has a huge opportunity to be also Aaron Rodgers' safety net, though he does have a familiar target in that offense with Allen Lazard. And I'm expecting big things from him as well. And also when they acquired Dalvin Cook, they made sure that Dalvin Cook understood, I did a big video on this, that Breece Hall is RB1 on that team.
Okay.
So that was part of him being able to come to that team, was to show the front office and to show that coaching staff that he understood that they were going to have to, defer to Breece. Now, there's still going to be a competition. They'll still go with the hot hand. But as far as the entering understanding, that's what it is.
You know who I really like, and this might not be a breakout because he did have a really good season last year, but Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. I really like that Pickett to Pickens connection. He had 800 yards last season. I think he goes over 1,000 this year.
Yeah, no, a lot of people spoke about him last year, especially during a time where people were starting to doubt the Steelers. And just like you mentioned, as far as why you like the AFC North, because they do have Tomlin and being able to fight through the adversity and showing their coaching prowess. So, I think that they'll have a better start than they did last year.
Let's talk coaches. Coach of the Year is rarely a clear-cut scenario, but let's take a look at the coaches across the league. Who do you think could be a contender for Coach of the Year this season?
Look, at this point, I've kind of gone all in on the Cleveland Browns, right?
If
I'm going to believe that the Cleveland Browns are going from worst to first in what I believe is the hardest division in the NFL, then I kind of have to believe that Kevin Stefanski is going to be the Coach of the Year in the NFL. The key is Deshaun Watson. And look, he has been brilliant as an offensive mind. What he has done with that team and quarterbacks who have not been very good to put them in contention. He got them to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. He is a really creative play caller, a really creative schemer. He has the foundational elements on the roster for this team to be excellent. If he gets Deshaun Watson to be just as excellent, this team wins the division, he's Coach of the Year.
Okay, Josina.
Definitely a big setup for that to happen if Deshaun Watson can take that leap. I don't know if the critics will still give Kevin his respect, though, and that's the thing, even though it's a great setup, and I do agree with you there. I am going to say John Harbaugh. And when I look at John Harbaugh and what he's done with the Baltimore Ravens, he's entering his 16th season. 11 of the 15 seasons, which is crazy that he's had entering into this year, have all been winning seasons. And of that total, another 3 have been at least 8 wins. So you're talking about just an incredible tenure of winning. And I think that when Lamar Jackson has gone down, the way that he still held the team together, even with losing the Rashard Batemans and the Devin Duvernays, he has shown that he can still muster up not only the creativity as far as obviously his consultation on offense and obviously his consultation on defense, but he possesses just that figurehead stability to keep everybody together. And even when I talk to John Harbaugh, sometimes I kid with him because, he has that, kind of gosh ollie, thing to him and Jim or whatever. But what people don't understand is that John Harbaugh can really, I'm trying to watch my language here. He can get in you, okay? And so when that side of him comes out, I call him Hoodie John. But I love Hoodie John because he's not afraid to tell. I mean, you think about some of the players that he's had over the years, from the Ray Lewises to the T. Suggs to those, he's had some players where you got to dig in. And I've seen him. He has no problem telling somebody what time it is. So I love that aspect of him. I think that even the way that the offense performed without Lamar, even in this Monday night game, with Josh Johnson, their offensive coordinator, Todd Monken has been talking about how much he loves the way he's grasping the offense. So I feel like even if someone like a Lamar Jackson were to go down, that they can still hold it together with a Josh. And sometimes it's being able to weather that type of adversity that helps you to win that type of accolade as far as Coach of the Year. And he has the respect, the last aspect, to get it from the media. So whereas I see as your pick has the better setup as far as Deshaun Watson going from here to here, I feel like John Harbaugh has a little bit more of that respect to actually compel the voters to actually give it to him.
Well, look, that is a great point.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these awards, especially Coach of the Year awards, they're about the narrative. Right? And they're about who do the voters think they want to win, who has a better story over the course of the year. So that's a really important point when thinking about making a pick like this.
And you know what narrative I really love? If the Lions could live up to their hype this season and win a playoff game, hands down this pick for me is Dan Campbell.
I like that pick.
I spent 7 years of my career in Detroit, and if that man could win a home playoff game in Detroit, they'd build a statue of him on Brush Street.
Yeah.
Well, look,
no question.
I firmly believe, I want the Lions to do well because the NFL is better when Dan Campbell is in it. We all have more fun. He's the perfect
Absolutely.
football guy for us to root for. I think he's deceptively smart. Everyone thinks he's sort of, lunkhead football dude, but he's crazy strategic
Yeah.
and smart with that team. So I want it to happen because I want him to be in the NFL for as long as
Absolutely.
possible.
Yeah, I love that. All right, guys, we've talked about teams we think are going to be good, but somebody's got to be at the bottom this season. What teams do you think are going to struggle in the 2023 campaign?
Well, I'm looking at the Cardinals.
I think we all are.
Yes, looking at the Cardinals, even though they obviously will get Kyler Murray back at some point, the fact that they are going to start off the season without him is a big blow. They have a lot of new coaches, obviously, from the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and all that other stuff. And they don't have much experience in that role. So there's just a lot of different components that make me concerned. I'm also looking at the Texans, from the standpoint of having C.J. Stroud. And not that they didn't show themselves to be formidable in a lot of games last year. I just think that if you're trying to really pin out who are the teams that are going to have some challenges in relation to how the other teams are stacked, the Houston Texans are going to stand out for me. And then I think the other team I was looking at, besides the Cardinals and besides the Texans, was Green Bay with Jordan Love.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a big transition losing Aaron Rodgers. He has such a big presence, and it's not to say that Jordan Love can't do well. He has the same agent as Deshaun Watson, and I think he's actually showing a little bit better in the preseason, especially in the second game, than people were giving him credit for. But it's still a big jump. I mean, there's just so much you haven't seen, and you just don't know what you don't know, and you haven't seen what you haven't seen. And so that alone, to me, has them in that category.
Add one more.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, we obviously know that Tom Brady has retired. We don't know who their quarterback is going to be. Their offensive line, which was a strength during the Tom Brady, era of 3 seasons, is severely diminished. Their defensive line isn't as good. Who's going to be their running back? They have good defensive backs, but I think in an NFC South that is actually a little bit more competitive with the Falcons, I think the Panthers will be pretty good. I think the Saints will win this division. I think you can chalk them up for 6 losses against those teams. I think this is going to be a really bad football team.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned what are their options at running back. Probably a team that should be considering a Jonathan Taylor trade, in addition to the Panthers, who probably have the assets as well to make some sort of acquisition too. They are so excited that Lamar Jackson came back for that $260 million contract, which obviously he's going to come back for.
And there is nothing better than being in that stadium when you know you have the atmosphere and the environment on your side, literal atmosphere and environment. It feels amazing. Sean Payton is a guy who, when he was out of the NFL with the Saints, he coached his son's Pee Wee League team and was drawing up plays on the sidelines to get them to be a championship team. This is a guy who loves coaching football.
I don't want to ruffle any feathers here because every fan base always thinks their stadium is the best stadium in the NFL. But who do you think has the best atmosphere for 2023? Josie, I know you've been to a lot of stadiums.
I've been to a lot of stadiums, and I've heard from a lot of fans on Twitter. In the good and the bad columns, based on what I'm reporting. And it's interesting because I do use Twitter at least to kind of help me gauge the pulse of the potency of the fan base. And there's years it's been the Eagles, and I would say last year the Dolphins and Tuanon, as they're called. Very, very formidable fan base. But this year, just based on how I see things, not only just flowing in person, but also on Twitter, I am going to go with the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh.
Anything right now that you put out about the Baltimore Ravens just goes viral on Twitter. They are just, chomping it up. They are so excited that Lamar Jackson came back for that $260 million contract, which obviously he's going to come back for, and that they added OBJ, and that they have Zay Flowers. They have a new offensive coordinator. And so I feel like the potency and the exuberance behind that fan base is very, very palpable. Now, clearly the Jets are there too.
Yeah.
But if I had to use my Twitter gauge as a discerning, kind of distinction here, I feel like I see the Ravens fans chomping more at the bit right now. Don't Jets fans, I know I got the green on, but I see it. I see it with the Baltimore Ravens right now, so I'm going to go with Baltimore, actually.
Okay, your pick, Chad.
Well, look, Baltimore is a great pick. Baltimore, the Ravens can claim, I've seen them claim this, the largest television screen in the state of Maryland.
Mm.
They are very proud of their television screen. But I would say, give me Lambeau Field and the Green Bay Packers,
Really?
which is always a great atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Think about when you're there, they've done a tremendous job of building up the community around Lambeau Field. So it feels like Americana kitsch when you're there, and it feels a little bit like you're at a Little League game, and then you walk into a stadium and it feels like the entire town has shown up for the game to cheer on all their kids. So imagine that with Jordan Love this year, where they are going to be sending so much love onto the field to support this guy who is brand new to the team as a starter. It's a community that knows no hate for their players. So I would want to be at Lambeau when Jordan Love is stepping on the field as a starter for the first time.
Not in December, though.
That's true.
I would
Or
disagree.
January.
It's even better. Listen, I grew up in Chicago. Like, I grew up going to Bears games in January and in December.
Yeah.
And there is nothing better than being in that stadium when you know you have the atmosphere and the environment on your side, literal atmosphere and environment. It feels amazing. You've got your hand warmers on. You're wearing 27 layers because it's 27 below. That's an advantage. I want to be there for that for my team.
Those of us trying to keep eyelash strips on.
Exactly. I'm going indoors in the NFC North. I'm going to go with the Lions because there's so much hype around that team. And Lions fans are dying to be good. And this is their year where they could do it.
Yeah.
This is the first time in history that the Lions have sold out season tickets at Ford Field. That place gets loud. I've been to a lot of games there. I really think the atmosphere is going to be fun.
There you go.
All right, guys, let's talk about who added a player to their team this offseason that's really going to change the game for them this year. Which offseason addition do you think is the biggest one? I think there's one elephant in the room right now, probably Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, considering Hard Knocks, considering all the hype around that. Josina, do you think that's the best one, or is there another one?
That is the best one because it is the quarterback that touches the ball every possession and has the most control over what is going on in the game. So if you have a significant change at quarterback, I think that you have to go with the quarterback. And again, I was watching Thursday Night Football, Jets Jaguars, and I saw how Zach Wilson ended that season and how he lost his starting job after that in the terrible press conference after that in terms of how he handled it. And he would admit that. He's in a much better position now. But when you think about the difference that it's making from where they were to what they have, got to go AR.
All right, look, we can all talk about Aaron Rodgers, and there is no more important position than quarterback. But I would argue that an equally important addition is the head coach who is whispering in the quarterback's ear. Sean Payton, going to the Broncos, is going to do what he needs to do to get Russell Wilson in a position to succeed for that team and get Russell Wilson closer to what he was when he was a Pro Bowler with the Seattle Seahawks. Sean Payton is a guy who, when he was out of the NFL with the Saints, he coached his son's Pee Wee League team and was drawing up plays on the sidelines to get them to be a championship team. This is a guy who loves coaching football. He will do wonders with a team that has a good enough roster to perform and be a playoff contender with a little bit better coaching. So I'm going to go with Sean Payton.
And he told Russell Wilson that he had to take his office out. No more private offices for the quarterback. So that was the first big significant change.
All right, player that's going to change, coach that's going to change the game. How about a unit that is going to change the game for their team this year? Which unit in the NFL, offense, defense, do you think is going to make the biggest difference for their team in 2023?
I'm just going to be different here because I keep talking offense, and you mentioned this unit as well, and I just have huge respect for the 49ers defense. Obviously, what they were able to do with Robert Saleh, having a lot of the same pieces, DeMeco Ryans being their defensive coordinator, now the head coach of the Texans. Now they have a new defensive coordinator in Steve Wilkes, which I think is an excellent opportunity for him, given everything he went through, being head coach of the Arizona Cardinals and having to weave his way back, through the Panthers, and now getting over there. But Nick Bosa is just such a beast, and all of the components that they have there, and I love their energy. And it's like I'm actually covering them week 3 when I go out to San Francisco, and every time you go out there, you feel that whole San Francisco Santa Clara vibe, because it's always warm out there, and they're always in a good mood. So I'm going to give some love to the 49ers defense.
All right, I would say a little bit of a surprise here. The Atlanta Falcons offensive line. I talked about how much I love Bijan Robinson. I love Arthur Smith. Chris Lidstrom, a guard for the Atlanta Falcons, was rated as the #1 run blocker in the NFL last year. That is the strength of this team, and that's what Arthur Smith wants it to be. So now Arthur Smith has a top 10 draft pick in Drake London, a top 10 draft pick in Kyle Pitts, a top 10 draft pick in Bijan Robinson. He's got talent everywhere. This is a top 10 offense no matter who's playing quarterback. If Desmond Ridder can be taken advantage of for what his skill set is, get him out of the pocket, make him comfortable. He has Bijan Robinson as a safety valve. If he can be serviceable, this is better than a top 10 offense. But it starts with that offensive line, which is really powerful. And the strength is run blocking, which plays to the strengths of what this team can do.
I just think, those are big ifs.
Everything's an if.
The
whole season is an if.
That's a big
This is when we can make a claim to if.
Of course.
Everything is optimism.
Everything
it's optimism
we
season.
discussed today, isn't it?
But to his point, Calais Campbell did tell me that one of the reasons why he chose the Atlanta Falcons is because he has huge respect for Arthur Smith. He said he drew up some of the harder offenses that he had to study going into those games to bolster your point.
Well, I like talking about the ifs. This has been fun because we're talking all about football, and it is finally back. Josina, Chad, thanks so much for joining us. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this season preview of the 2023 NFL season. For more content and news, head to our news site at news.bet365.com or any of our social media channels.